The last thing Mason Whitlow expected when he walked into the dripping penthouse bathroom was a barefoot woman in a silk robe staring at him like he'd broken into her castle. "Who are you and what the hell are you doing in my apartment?" Mason froze, wrench in hand, water still pouring from the pipe behind him. "Maintenance," he said, voice rough. He swiped his wet forehead with the back of his arm. Pipe burst. "I got the call 30 minutes ago." The woman crossed her arms. "At midnight, ma'am," he muttered, crouching again to stop the leak. "Water doesn't check the clock." She didn't say anything for a moment. Mason could feel her eyes on him, and not in the way people usually looked at plumbers. Then she sighed and walked off, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Mason's hands moved on instinct, tightening the valve, feeling the pressure shift. He didn't belong here, the place was insane. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, a chandelier bigger than his kitchen, and floors so polished he was scared to breathe wrong. It was a different world, not his. He was just trying to feed his kid and keep the lights on. Harley, his 6-year-old daughter, had been asleep in his truck downstairs with a blanket and his hoodie wrapped around her. He didn't take these after-hours jobs for fun. But when the apartment manager called asking if someone could come ASAP, he didn't hesitate. He finished tightening the valve and stood up, wiping his hands on his shirt when he heard the woman again. "Do you always bring your daughter to your jobs?" Mason froze. She was standing in the doorway, now dressed in a navy jumpsuit and heels, a glass of water in her hand. "I saw her," she said quietly, "sleeping in your truck." He clenched his jaw. "Didn't have a sitter tonight." "Is she okay?" "She's fine," he said, a little too fast. The woman walked closer and the light hit her fully. She wasn't just pretty, she was stunning. Sharp cheekbones, long dark curls, and eyes that didn't miss a thing. "I'm Delilah Jennings," she said, setting the glass down on the counter. "I own this place." Of course she did. Mason gave a stiff nod. "You're all set now, the pipe's sealed." "I'll let the building manager know." But instead of letting him go, she tilted her head. "Do you always do emergency calls by yourself?" "Look, I'm just trying to do my job. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't. You just surprised me." "Most guys in suits don't crawl under sinks." He almost laughed. "Yeah, well, I haven't worn a suit since my brother's wedding." A beat of silence passed. "You look exhausted." He rubbed his face. "Long week." Delilah stared at him a moment longer. "Why don't you bring your daughter up here?" He blinked. "What?" "She's in a truck. It's cold out. Bring her up. She can sleep on the couch while you finish the paperwork." "I'm not." "This isn't." Mason shook his head. "I don't think that's a good idea." "I do." He hesitated. One look in her eyes told him she wasn't asking for show. She meant it, and Harley was sleeping in a cold truck. 5 minutes later, Mason was carrying his daughter into the penthouse. She stirred a little, curling into his chest, but didn't wake. Delilah had turned down the lights, set a throw blanket on the velvet couch, and even brought out a little stuffed bear she said her niece had left last time she visited. Mason gently laid Harley down and tucked the blanket around her. His heart clenched seeing her so small in a place so big. "She's beautiful," Delilah said softly behind him. "She's my whole world," Mason said, not turning around. "She must be proud of you," he huffed. "She deserves more than what I can give her." Delilah walked to the kitchen and opened a small drawer. "How about coffee?" she asked. "Or tea?" "I make a killer cup of peppermint. I should go." "You haven't filled out the invoice," he sighed. "Fine, 5 minutes." While he filled out the paperwork, Delilah poured 2 mugs and sat across from him at the marble kitchen island. Their hands brushed when she handed him the cup. It was quiet for a moment, just the hum of the city outside the windows and the soft sound of Harley breathing. "You always do this alone?" Delilah asked. "What? Raise her, work, take care of everything." "Her mom left when she was 2, he said flatly. "So yeah. It's just me." Delilah looked at him with something unreadable in her eyes. "That must be hard." "It is," he admitted. He expected her to offer pity or some awkward comment, but she didn't. Instead, she just sat there, sipping her tea. When he stood to leave, she surprised him again. "I have a leak in the upstairs bathroom too. The faucet's been loose for a week." He raised a brow. "You want me to fix it now?" She smiled a little. "Unless you're in a hurry." He looked at Harley asleep on the couch, then back at Delilah. "Lead the way." By the time he finished tightening the faucet upstairs, Delilah had put on music's soft jazz that drifted through the apartment. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching him work. "You're good at this," she said. "I've had practice. You know, most guys would have said no to a midnight call. Most guys don't have rent due tomorrow." She tilted her head. "You're honest." Mason stood, stretching his back. "Yeah, gets me in trouble sometimes." Delilah stepped closer. "Not with me." Their eyes locked. For the first time in a long time, Mason didn't feel like someone was looking down on him. She looked at him like he was. Enough, and that scared the hell out of him. "I should get her home," he said, his voice low. Delilah nodded, but before he could turn, she reached out and touched his hand. "You can come back if you ever need to." He stared at her. "You don't even know me." "I think I'm starting to." She held his gaze, and for a second the world outside disappeared. Mason nodded slowly. "Good night, Delilah." "Good night, Mason." As he carried Harley back down to the truck, something in his chest felt different. Lighter. He didn't know what just happened, but he knew he wanted to see her again. Mason didn't expect to hear from her again. But 2 days later, while replacing a busted water heater in a cramped basement apartment, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He wiped his hands on his jeans and answered. "Yeah," a pause. Then her voice low, smooth, unmistakable. "Is this Mason Whitlow?" He straightened instinctively. "Speaking. It's Delilah Jennings. I was wondering if you're available tomorrow afternoon." He leaned against the wall, heart thudding a little harder than it should have. "What for?" "My building manager told me you handle private work sometimes. I have a place uptown, a gallery space. There's a plumbing issue in the back room." "You have a gallery?" There was a trace of amusement in her voice. "I wear a few hats." He glanced at the time. "School pickup in an hour." "Yeah, I can make it work." "Good, I'll text you the address." "Thank you, Mason." She hung up before he could say anything else. The next day, Harley sat in the passenger seat, legs swinging as she munched on crackers. "Where are we going?" "Work," he said, turning onto the wide avenue lined with trees and stone buildings. "Big fancy place." "Will there be snacks?" "Probably not," she frowned. "Then it's not that fancy," he grinned despite himself. The gallery was tucked between a tailor's atelier and a private piano studio, the kind of place with tall windows and gold-lettered signage. As soon as Mason stepped inside, he smelled oil paints and polished wood. Delilah stood near the back, wearing a tailored black blazer over a slate blue blouse, her hair gathered at her nape. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. "You brought her," she said, her voice warm. "She's with me today." Harley peeked from behind Mason's leg. Delilah knelt down to her level. "Hi there, I'm Delilah." The little girl blinked. "Do you have any snacks?" Delilah laughed. "As a matter of fact." She opened a drawer behind the front desk and produced a small box of animal crackers. "Emergency stash." Harley snatched them with a grin and settled on a cushioned bench near the window. Mason followed Delilah to the back, where a utility sink sat half-detached from the wall. "She started leaking 2 days ago," she said, stepping aside so he could inspect it. "I tried turning off the valve, but it didn't help." He crouched and ran his fingers along the pipe. "Looks like the connection's loose. Might need a whole new bracket." "You always sound like you know exactly what to do," she said, leaning against the nearby wall. "I've seen worse." He reached for his tool bag. "Gallery's beautiful, by the way." "Thanks." Her voice softened. "It was my grandmother's before mine. She started it after the war, said the city needed more color." He glanced up. "Is that why you kept it?" "I almost sold it a dozen times," Delilah admitted, "but every time I tried, it felt like cutting off a piece of myself." Mason tightened the fitting and reached for a wrench. "You run it on your own." "I do now." She hesitated. "My business partner left last year. Took a few clients with him. It's been a balancing act." He looked up at her again, really looked, and saw the tightness around her mouth. "That's rough." "Yeah." She folded her arms, then added, "But I've always landed on my feet." "I can tell." Their eyes held for a moment before he turned back to his work. An hour later, the leak was fixed, the sink reinforced, and Harley had convinced one of the gallery assistants to show her how to fold paper cranes. Delilah walked Mason to the front door. "You're good at what you do," she said. "So are you," he replied. "You got a kid folding origami with someone she met 10 minutes ago." She smiled, not soft this time, but proud. "Art has a way of making people brave." He nodded. Thanks for calling me. Most people in your world don't exactly look twice at guys like me. Delilah tilted her head. Maybe that's because they don't know what they're missing. He stared at her, caught off guard. Would you have dinner with me? She asked. He blinked. What? I'm not great at subtlety, she said, and I don't have time for games. I'd like to take you out, just dinner. No strings. Mason looked back at Harley, still giggling with the assistant. Bring her, Delilah said gently. We'll go somewhere with real food and no animal crackers. He hesitated. Are you sure? Very. Her eyes didn't waver. I think we'd enjoy each other's company. He exhaled slowly, then nodded. All right, dinner. She handed him a card. Her fingers brushed his. Tomorrow night, I'll handle everything. He tucked the card into his back pocket. As he walked out with Harley's hand in his, he couldn't shake the feeling that somehow his life had just shifted again, and this time, it wasn't because something broke. It was because something had started. The restaurant wasn't what Mason expected. He'd braced himself for crystal chandeliers and tiny portions with foreign names. Instead, Delilah had reserved a table at her rooftop bistro tucked above a historic brownstone, the kind of place lit with golden lanterns and vines twined along the wrought iron railings. The city glowed below them like a river of stars. Harley sat beside him in a navy sweater dress, her curls pinned up with one of the clips Delilah had given her when they'd arrived. She was busy coloring the kids' menu with a tiny set of pencils the hostess had handed her, humming softly. Delilah took the seat across from Mason, her coat folded over the chair beside her, revealing a forest green blouse and a pair of slim gray trousers. A breeze caught a strand of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear without noticing his eyes lingering. I hope this place is okay, she said. It's more than okay, Mason answered, glancing at the linen napkins and the flickering candle on the table. We don't usually eat anywhere that has its own herb garden. Delilah smiled, but didn't make a joke. Instead, she studied him, her fingers curled around the stem of her glass. You didn't look nervous when you walked in. Mason leaned back slightly. I've spent most of my life walking into rooms I didn't belong in. Eventually, you stop flinching. Delilah's expression softened. You belong here. Not usually with people like you, people like me, she asked, raising an eyebrow. You know what I mean. I'd rather you tell me anyway, Mason exhaled. People who have options, who don't have to choose between groceries or gas. She didn't flinch. I inherited a lot. But that doesn't mean I've never felt trapped, he studied her. You don't seem like someone who lets herself get stuck. I don't. She looked toward Harley, who was now making a paper crown out of her napkin. But even when you're free, it doesn't always mean you're seen. He hesitated. You don't feel seen, not in the way that matters. Their server arrived with plates grilled salmon for Delilah, steak for Mason, a tiny cheeseburger for Harley. Conversation paused as the dishes were arranged. Harley took a big bite and looked at Mason. This place has real ketchup, he grinned. You doing okay? She nodded, mouth full. She's really nice. Delilah raised her glass slightly. To real ketchup. Mason tapped his water glass against hers, and surprise dinners. After a few more bites, Delilah set down her fork. I've been thinking about something. Mason waited. I want to offer you something, she continued. Not out of pity, not because I think you need saving, but because I think you deserve more than what you've had to carry alone. He leaned forward, wary. What kind of offer? I'm opening a new wing in the gallery. It's going to need renovation, plumbing, lighting, the works. I'd like to hire you and give you full oversight. He blinked. That's a big contract. It is. Why me? Because you show up, because you don't cut corners. Because when something breaks, you fix it without asking if it's worth your time. He looked down at his plate, his appetite suddenly gone. I don't want to be someone you feel obligated to help. This isn't charity, Mason, it's recognition and trust. He met her eyes. You're serious. I am. Harley tugged his sleeve. Does that mean we'll be working in her art house? He blinked at her. Maybe. Delilah leaned in. I think you both belong there. Mason didn't reply right away. He took a breath, trying to steady the rush of emotion rising in his chest. It wasn't just about a job. It was about someone seeing him as capable of more than survival. As someone worth investing in. Dinner drifted into dessert, a slice of chocolate tart for Harley, a shared dish of citrus sorbet for the adults. The conversation shifted to lighter things. Harley's favorite cartoons, Delilah's childhood fear of swans, Mason's disastrous attempt at building a treehouse last summer. When they finally stepped into the cool night air, Delilah walked them to Mason's truck, where Harley promptly climbed into the back seat and passed out against her stuffed bear. Mason closed the door gently, then turned back to Delilah. She was standing beneath the street lamp, her chin tilted slightly, her arms folded as if holding back something she wasn't sure she should say. He joined her, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. "You didn't have to do any of this. I know. Why did you?" "Because I wanted to." He watched her, the way the breeze moved through her hair, the way her gaze didn't waver from his. "You don't scare easy, do you?" he asked. "No," she said. "But you do." He laughed under his breath, the sound quiet and raw. "I don't know what to do with this." "You don't have to do anything," she said. "Just don't run from it." He hesitated, then reached out. His fingers brushed hers, hesitant at first, until she laced them together without waiting for permission. "You're not what I expected," he said. "That's the idea." They stood there in silence, the city humming around them, until Harley stirred in the truck and pressed her cheek against the window. Mason let go of Delilah's hand. "I should get her home." Delilah nodded once, but didn't step back. "Tomorrow," he paused. "Yeah. Tomorrow." As he drove away, the rearview mirror caught one last glimpse of her standing beneath the street lamp. She didn't wave. She didn't move. She didn't have to, because for the first time in a long time, Mason wasn't wondering whether someone would stay. He was wondering what it would feel like if he stopped bracing for the moment they didn't. Mason adjusted the collar of his button-up, feeling uncomfortably aware that he hadn't worn anything with buttons in over a year. Harley's head rested against his arm as they rode the elevator up to the penthouse, her new sneakers swinging above the floor. When the doors opened, Delilah was waiting. She'd returned from a week-long trip to Paris, some gallery acquisition she'd only mentioned in passing, but she looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her earrings mismatched, and her smile was hesitant. "You came," she said. "You asked," Mason replied. Harley stepped forward and held out a folded piece of paper. "I made you something." Delilah crouched to accept it. It was a sketch of the gallery's front window with stick figures labeled Mason, Harley, and Delilah, all holding paintbrushes. Her eyes lingered on it. "This is the best welcome home I've ever had." Harley beamed and wandered off toward the living room, already comfortable in the space. Delilah stood, tucking the drawing carefully into a drawer near the hallway. "I didn't expect to miss you two." Mason shifted his weight. "You didn't have to say that." "I did." He followed her to the kitchen, where a half-finished tray of pastries sat on the counter, flour dusting the marble like a forgotten snowstorm. "I tried baking," she said, glancing at the mess. "It didn't go well." "Looks edible," he said. "It tastes like regret," he chuckled. "You could have just ordered something." "I wanted to do something real." Mason looked at her closely. There was a knot in her brow she hadn't had before. "Something happened while you were gone." She leaned against the counter. "My father's estate lawyer met me in Paris. He handed me a file. I didn't know he'd set up a trust for the gallery. It's got stipulations." "What kind of stipulations?" "I can't sell it. Not for another 10 years. Not without board approval." "You were thinking of selling," she hesitated. "After last year, I didn't know if I could keep it going. Until recently." Mason rested his hands on the edge of the counter. "Since when do you run from hard things?" "I don't run," she said. "I recalculate." He nodded slowly. "So what's the recalculation now?" Delilah looked up at him. "You," he blinked. "Me, you and Harley. The way you both changed the space changed me." "I didn't do anything special. You stayed. That's not something I'm used to." Mason let that sit between them. Then he picked up one of the ruined pastries and took a bite. It was unsurprisingly awful. Delilah laughed, the sound sharp and genuine. "I warned you," he swallowed. "I've had worse." He wiped his hands on a towel. "So what now?" "I want to offer you something again," she said. "But this time not a job." He narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I bought the apartment across the hall." Mason frowned. "Why? It's got 2 bedrooms, a lot of light, and it's yours if you want it." He froze. "You're offering us a place to live. I'm offering you a place to belong." "Delilah, don't say no yet. Just hear me out." He crossed his arms. "I know what it's like to be self-reliant until it's the only way you know how to breathe. but there's a difference between surviving and living, and I want you to live. I want Harley to wake up in a place that doesn't rattle when trucks pass. I want you to work with me, not for me, to build something that's ours." He didn't speak. "I'm not trying to fix your life," she said. "I just want to be part of it." A quiet voice broke the moment. "Dad." Harley stood in the hallway, holding her stuffed bear. "I'm sleepy." Mason blinked and nodded. "Okay, sweetheart." Delilah stepped back. "You can take the bedroom tonight just to try it." He looked at her, then at Harley, then back again. "Just tonight. I'll take it." Later that night, Mason stood on the balcony of the new apartment, the city stretching beneath him like a promise he didn't know he was allowed to believe in. The bedroom behind him was quiet, Harley asleep, tucked under a duvet that probably cost more than his truck. Delilah stepped onto the balcony beside him, barefoot, holding 2 cups of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, still adjusting. She handed him a mug. "To new places," he sipped. "You're really not going to take no for an answer, are you? I already have your daughter's drawing framed." "You're stuck with me," he stared at her. "I'm not an easy man to love. I'm not trying to love you easily," she said. "I'm doing it on purpose." He set the mug down and pulled her toward him. She didn't resist. Her arms slid around his waist, her head resting against his chest. "You scare me," he admitted into her hair. "Good," she whispered. "That means you care." Below them, the city moved on. But above it, in a space that hadn't existed until they made it together, Mason felt the weight in his chest finally shift. Not disappear, but share itself with someone who didn't ask him to be anything but real. Later that month, the gallery reopened its new wing. Mason stood at the back with Harley on his shoulders, watching as Delilah addressed the crowd. She wore a simple black dress, her voice clear, her hands steady. The applause was thunderous. When she locked eyes with him across the room, she smiled, not the kind of smile meant for cameras, but the kind that only belonged to one person. Afterward, she crossed the floor and reached for his hand. "Everything's different now," she said. He squeezed her fingers. "Yeah, but it finally feels right." And when Harley reached down from his shoulders to place her tiny hand over theirs, Mason knew he didn't just fix a leak that night. He found the kind of love you don't repair, you build it. Piece by piece, together. The morning sun poured through the tall windows, casting golden light across the hardwood floor where Harley sat cross-legged, carefully arranging colored beads into a pattern she insisted would become a necklace worthy of the gallery. Mason crouched beside her, helping to thread the fine cord through the beads with the same patience he used to seal a pipe or mend a cracked wall. His hands, always steady, trembled slightly today, but for reasons that had nothing to do with stress or physical labor. He glanced toward the open bedroom door. Delilah was inside, pacing. She'd been quiet since the courier delivered the letter. He rose slowly, nudging Harley's shoulder. "Finish the pattern while I talk to Delilah, okay?" Harley nodded, her focus unbroken. Mason stepped into the bedroom and closed the door behind him. Delilah stood in front of the vanity, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The envelope lay open beside her, the letter unfolded with surgical precision. She didn't look up when he entered. "Is it real?" he asked. "Very," she said, her voice low. "What do they want?" She turned then, slowly. "My father left another provision, a formal announcement of succession. The board wants to make it public. They're naming me chairwoman of Jennings Holdings." He blinked. "That's not just the gallery, it's everything. The real estate, the foundations, the studios in Milan and Tokyo. I'd have to oversee all operations." He stepped toward her. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know," she said. "I thought I wanted independence, then I found it, then I found you. And now they want to crown me queen of an empire I stopped believing in a long time ago. You don't have to say yes. If I don't, they'll appoint someone else. Someone who'll tear apart what my grandmother built. Someone who won't protect the gallery. You think you can? I know I can. But it means travel, long hours, making decisions that affect thousands of people." He nodded slowly. "And us," Delilah finally looked him in the eye. "That's what I'm afraid of." He closed the distance between them. "Then don't be. You don't understand what stepping into this means. I'd be pulled in 100 directions. I can't promise I'll be home every night. I can't promise I won't miss piano recitals and gallery brunches and mornings like this one. I'm not asking for perfection, Delilah. I'm asking for you." She drew in a breath, her voice quiet. You're not intimidated. I'm in love with you. That scares me a lot more than a corner office. He touched her face gently, his thumb brushing the curve of her cheekbone. You don't have to do this alone anymore, he said. We figure it out, together. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. You'd really be okay with it. With me leading a billion-dollar legacy while you're fixing broken furnaces. Delilah, I don't care how much money's behind your last name. I care that you kiss Harley goodnight, that you remember how I take my coffee. That when you walk into a room, the whole damn thing lights up. She inhaled sharply, but before she could speak, Harley's voice rang out from the other room. Dad, I finished the necklace. Delilah exhaled a laugh, blinking quickly. Remind me to thank her for saving me from crying. Mason squeezed her hand. We'll make it work, you and me and her. Later that day, Delilah stood in front of the gallery's central atrium for her official announcement. The press had gathered, cameras flashing as she stepped up to the microphone. Mason held Harley's hand at the back of the crowd, watching the woman he loved stand tall and certain, no longer pacing in the shadows of doubt. I accept this position not because I wish to lead alone, Delilah said, her voice clear and steady, but because I believe in the power of legacy and reinvention. I believe in honoring tradition while building something new, something honest. Applause erupted, but Mason didn't hear it. He saw her glance his way, a flicker of unspoken truth passing between them. This wasn't her hiding behind wealth or titles. This was her choosing it and choosing him. That night, when the photographers were gone and Harley had fallen asleep in the guest room with her new necklace wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet, Delilah and Mason stood on the penthouse balcony again. Only this time, there was no hesitation. I want to ask you something, she said, her fingers brushing the edge of his collar. Mason raised a brow. I thought I was supposed to do the asking. You're not the only one who gets to break tradition. She pulled a small box from her pocket velvet, deep green with a gold clasp. Inside was a simple platinum band gleaming in the moonlight. I don't need a ceremony, she said. I don't need a crowd, but I need you. He stared at the ring, then at her. You're serious? I've never been more. He took the box, closed it gently, and then reached into his own pocket. Funny. I was waiting for the right time. He pulled out a matching box, black velvet, frayed at the corners. Inside was a delicate gold band with tiny inlaid diamonds, subtle and strong. Delilah laughed, her eyes wide with astonishment. Are you kidding me? I was going to ask you tonight. After Harley went to bed, they both stood there, two proposals suspended in the air, the city buzzing around them like a witness. Then I guess we both say yes, she said softly. Yeah, he murmured. We do. They kissed slow and deep, no longer weighed down by uncertainty or fear. Just two people who had chosen each other not in spite of their differences, but because of them. 1 year later, the gallery hosted a private showing. The theme was unlikely masterpieces. Each piece had been curated by Delilah and Mason together. Works from unknown artists, salvaged sculptures, and even a few of Harley's more abstract crayon designs framed in silver. Guests mingled under soft lights, sipping champagne and marveling at the transformation of the space. In the center of the room stood a sculpture made of copper and reclaimed wood. It twisted upward like two hands reaching for each other, entwined. A small plaque beneath it read, "Built from the broken." Delilah stood beside Mason, her hand resting on his chest. You still okay working with me? She asked, glancing at the crowd. Long as I get to come home to you. And Harley, she's upstairs with your niece. They're plotting something involving glitter and a dog costume. Delilah laughed, leaning against him. I love you, you know. I know, he said, kissing her temple. And I love you right back. They didn't need chandeliers or jet-setting vacations. They had a life built from the real, the unexpected, and the deeply earned. And that was the kind of forever they'd chosen together.